I have to apologize. There have been some people crying uncle about the wind noises and the leaves and stuff when I'm walking. I don't know why they've gotten so loud. I've dropped my phone a lot of times. I wonder if something's wrong with the microphone. But I go on these walks because when I'm at home, I'm constantly interrupted. Ever since COVID, I mean, there's just nobody cares. They all want to interrupt me. But anyway, I'm going to try to do a better job of doing messages at home. We'll see how that goes. Um, Now, I was reading 2nd and 3rd John and kind of got some insight into why. I mean, I already kind of knew, but especially reading 3rd John, I got an idea of why John speaks very, I wouldn't say cryptically, but he's very careful about the way he uses words. And he doesn't address any individuals by name except in 3rd John. And in 3rd John, he's writing to an individual, which is what really reveals the situation there and why he's so careful to write the way he does. And sometimes, he writes in such absolute terms, and he also writes of the commandment when he's referring to the gospel. He speaks of it as if it's law. And that religious people read it that way. 1st John, that's why so many people have feared approaching it, because it's so loaded with so many religious interpretations, and the language doesn't help, it seems. Only if you are born again and have spiritual eyes to see and an appetite to follow as we unpack 1st John do you see that he's actually talking about the gospel when he refers to the commandment. And when he refers to loving the brethren, he's actually talking about believing the gospel. It's like, why did he do that? 3rd John really reveals why. I'm going to do 2nd John and 3rd John, but 3rd John shows that there was this guy, Diotrephes, there, who loved to have the preeminence, but wouldn't receive the apostles, and had seduced enough of the church that he was in charge. He was in charge of the church there, and he was casting people out of the fellowship who did receive the apostles in their teaching. And being cast out of the church is a really big deal when there's no other church. It's not like you get kicked out of, First Community Fellowship, and so you go down the road to Cornerstone Baptist, and when you get kicked out of there, you get to go down over to this Engage, and you try all these different things because nothing works. No, the saints were all in one place, meeting as the church, and there wasn't another way to meet. And because of that, and because of the relative immaturity of the saints, it's still, Christianity is still getting rooted, and because of that situation, he said, these people walking the way of Cain, they seduce you. The saints had been seduced to stay put, where Diotrephes had taken the lead, and he may not even been a believer. And he's casting people out of the fellowship who received the apostles and their teaching. So when he writes to the church, especially if it's going to be circulated among them, I think he writes in a way so that when he's talking about the gospel, it sounds like he's talking about the law. To hide it from the legalists. And I had this feeling when I was going through 1st John, but it was really confirmed when I read 3rd John today. I'm just going to read it. The elder unto well-beloved Gaius, whom I love in the truth. Beloved, I wish that you may prosper and be in health, above all things, even as your soul prospers. For I rejoiced greatly when the brethren came and testified of the truth that is in thee, even that as you walk in the truth. I have no greater joy than to hear my children walk in truth. Beloved, you do faithfully whatever things you do to the brethren and to strangers, which have borne witness of your love or your charity before the church, whom if you bring forward on their journey after a godly sort, you do well, because that for his name's sake they went forth, taking nothing of the Gentiles. Now, he's talking about strangers and brethren who are walking in the name of the Lord, and for his name's sake are they aren't taking from the Gentiles. Which means, if you remember, I think what it's saying is their needs are not met. And so you're receiving them and doing a good thing. And in 1 John, it talks about walking in love. There's one practical admonition about walking in love that says, whoever has this world's good and doesn't and withholds his bowels of compassion towards his brother in need, how can he say he walks in love? And you go, well, that's an admonition to walk in love. And even in that time, even during that pass of 1 John when I did this study, I found myself saying I believe that's a reference to the fact that Diotrephes would not receive the brethren and wouldn't receive the apostles, which to them, they were basically homeless. They lived from the support of the churches, and he was withholding it. So, hold on a second. I'll be done in a second, all right? Never mind. I'll come back to this. So let's see if I can kind of wrap this up here. But so basically, what he's referring to here is, look, you're doing well because you receive the brothers and take care of their needs and send them on their journey after a godly sort, which means he's like a fueling station for the saints, who aren't being received by the church. Because for his name's sake they went forth, taking nothing of the Gentiles. We therefore ought to receive such, that we may be fellow helpers to the truth. In other words, our ministry is a hospitality shown to these brothers who are going out with the truth. And this is specifically in contrast to Diotrephes and others who are starting to follow him. People are afraid to show their love towards these brothers and pilgrims who are coming on behalf of the apostles, because Diotrephes is going to cast them out of the church if they receive him. It's just like in John, it's said that the Jews believed Jesus, but they wouldn't confess him for fear that they'd be put out of the synagogue. And I was like, why is this a gospel to the church? Focused on mystery truths, the mystery of Christ in you, the hope of glory. It's for the church. Why is he making such a big deal about the Jews and their religion? Well, because it was being reproduced in the church. Even in the Epistle of James, we see that. We see evidences that, people were showing preference and not taking care of the poor and stuff like that. There was actually a pressure to not be hospitable, because you'd be associated with those who are going out among the Gentiles in the name of Jesus, not taking a salary and depending on the churches for their support so that the gospel can go out. And they put themselves in need. And Jesus commanded the disciples to do that when they went. He said, don't take anything with you, right? No purse, nothing, no money. And when you're received, you're either received into somebody's house, and if so, let your peace be upon them. If not, you got to wipe the dust off your feet. But they were to live from the gospel, because you put yourself in a situation of vulnerability. It's not because they needed their needs met by that, because Paul was a tent maker. You could work, and it's not that the gospel should be for charge. It's that when you put yourself in a position of dependence like that, it reveals the hearts of those who receive and decline you. How can those who say they love God turn you away if they see you in need? And that's what he says in 1 John is like, you say you love God, how yet you withhold the world's good and shut up your bowels of compassion towards the brothers who are in need. How can you say you love God if you don't love the person in front of you? And it's the same thing here. But Gaius did receive the saints, and by doing that, he put himself at risk of being cast out. But John is like, no, that's what you should do. He said, I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loved to have the preeminence among them, received us not. Therefore, if I come, I will remember his deeds which he does, prating against us with malicious words, and not content with that, neither does he receive the brethren, and forbids them that would, and casts them out of the church. Again, where are you going to go if you're cast out of the church? You know, in that time there was such a stigma on believing in Jesus that it was probably a threat to your employment. There, you know, they lived together as a community as a safety measure, taking care of each other, you know, in need. The church was the way. Much more now than now. We live in this individualistic Western society, but I'll bet the churches in China can relate, the underground churches. To be cast out of the fellowship is not a small thing. Number one, you know, if Diotrephes could love to have the preeminence, that means people gave him the preeminence, which means he was probably very spiritual seeming. He's a seducer. That he wouldn't have the preeminence unless he'd been given the preeminence by men, because they were impressed by something about him, his rhetoric, his spirituality, whatever, and then eventually he had control. And it was a negative thing, and he is spreading malicious words about the apostles, and the church is receiving those words. You know, otherwise they would just leave. You know, it wouldn't be a big deal. You just cast out Diotrephes. No, the church must have been, a large portion of the brothers and sisters must have been deceived by this guy and believed what he was saying, which made it really hard for the apostles. And whatever this guy was saying was probably antichrist, you know. And so when John wrote 1 John and he's talking about walking darkness and all this stuff, yeah, he's talking about antichrists out there. But he's talking, I believe, right under Diotrephes' nose. And he is talking about him in a very godly way that Diotrephes could not refute without actually speaking against the word itself, you know. So he's writing in a very spiritual way that can only be understood by spiritual ears, in a way to hide, like Jesus spoke in parables, not to reveal truth and make it simple so everybody could understand it, but actually to conceal truth, so that hearing they would not hear, and seeing they would not see, and their eyes would be closed, right? He did that as a judgment to the religious people. I think John, that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult to read, because it's written in this way to conceal the truth from eyes that shouldn't see it. And this church was a real mix. Things had gotten really dangerous. This is Ephesus, where Paul had warned for 3 years without stopping, without ceasing, with tears, day and night, he said in Acts 21 to the elders in Ephesus, that there would be wolves and people speaking corrupt things and would not spare the flock. You know, and then 1 and Timothy were written to Ephesus, and that church was a mess. He sent Timothy because people wouldn't tolerate sound doctrine, and they'd go after all these different things and would reject the ministry. And Timothy got so discouraged, you know. And now John is here. Same thing. But he's writing to Ephesus that won't receive him. Wow. Okay, so then he says, Beloved, follow not that which is... so he talks about Diotrephes, you know, would cast people out who would receive the brethren. So follow that which is not that which is evil, but that which is good. What are you going to do if you're in that situation? He that does good is of God, but he that does not has not seen God. You know, what are you supposed to do about this Diotrephes? Well, he's making it really clear that this guy Diotrephes is a problem. There should be no ambiguity. He's speaking evil words against the apostles, casting people out, loving preeminence, forbidding people from receiving the apostles and the brethren, and then casting them out of the fellowship. Beloved, follow not that which is evil, but that which is good. What the guy was doing was evil, and they needed to know that that's not what they should follow. Because he must have had enough charm or something that they were at a quandary of what to do. If I receive the apostles, it'll damage the church even more, you know. Okay, so anyway, beloved, follow not that which is evil, but that which is good. He that does good is of God. He that does evil has not seen God. Demetrius, now he's one of the brothers, has a good report of all men and of the truth itself. Yea, and we also bear record, and you know that our record is true. So we base our reception of people on whether or not the testimony is, the record is true that they bear. They bear a record of the truth itself. What is that? That's the same thing he was talking about 1 John 5. No wonder it was so important for him to show them how to recognize Antichrist versus how to recognize brothers by the testimony, the truth that's on their lips. And we'll see when we get to 2 John, which I'm going to read after this one. I'll come back and do another video. The truth is so important that he calls it the doctrine of Christ. And he makes it very clear that the reason we love people is for the truth's sake. And the way we love them is in the truth. And it's based entirely on a reception of the truth. We receive brothers because of the testimony, no other reason. And if they bear that testimony, we receive them. If they don't, we're to reject them. And the ambiguity in Ephesus was they were tolerating a mixture. They had, on the one hand, some that believed the truth and were affiliated with the apostles, but still wanted to be part of the church. And the church consisted of people who believed the truth and rejected it. And because those who believed the truth did not but were partaking with those who did not, there was just a mixture. It was bringing everybody into bondage, and it was only going to get worse. So now he's having to write to individuals in the church who hadn't gone that way, and he's strengthening their faith, you know. Beloved, follow not that which is evil, but that which is good. He that does good is of God. He that does evil is not seen God. Demetrius has a good report of all men, and of the truth itself. Yea, we also bear record, and you know that our record is true. I have many things to write to thee, but I will not with ink and pen write to thee. Why? Because he doesn't want any of his words to be taken out of context and circulated around. But I trust I will see you shortly, and we will speak face to face. Peace to thee. Our friends salute thee. Greet the friends by name. The friends of what? Friends of the truth. And by name, he won't name them. You know, Paul's letters all end with, okay, Gaius says hi, and Timothy says hi, and Euodias and Syntyche hi. You know, there's all these names. John doesn't name any names, except at this one he did name Diotrephes and Gaius. But in 2 John, he writes even more cryptically. And in 1 John, there's no names. And it's because he's protecting the saints. And that's just not a concept we really are very familiar with, this idea of protecting those who are standing for the truth. It's like, well, if they're standing, they should be loud about it. No, sometimes there's need of wisdom. You know, there's dangerous situations that people are in, and people have to be very careful. That's why, like, missionaries from China will come, and they won't mention any names of any of the churches or any of the organizations or anything, because the persecution there is intense. And there's false brethren in the midst among the churches who are there to expose people and control situation on top of it. Not only is that government a prototype of the beast system and so is so oppressive, but even among the churches, you can imagine there's all kinds of spiritual warfare and wolves and everything. So this is kind of just a background of the situation, which will help me understand why 1 John is written in such a way that can be difficult to understand. It's not meant to be as clear as, say, Ephesians. On the one hand, there's mystery truth in it. On the other hand, though, it's designed in a way to protect the recipients who are in this mixed fellowship where the wolves have really taken control and that yet there's nowhere to go. And he doesn't say really abandon the whole situation either. It's kind of interesting. I don't know if we can apply that today. I believe we come out of all those things. We have if you have the freedom of choice to come out of a situation that's completely unclean, then you should do it, you know. Okay, well, I don't know. This was enlightening to me. I don't know. See if it'll help you. Take care.